All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for Weather Where You Are. Lots of important information to cover here on, of course, Hurricane Helene. We just got an update from the National Hurricane Center a little over half an hour ago, just before 11 a.m. And the latest is what you're seeing swirling on your screen there. A Category 2 hurricane strengthened slightly, now with winds of 105 miles per hour, moving north-northeast at 14 miles per hour. So a very quick moving storm, and it is starting to kind of take that turn towards the Florida coastline. Not expected to directly hit the Gulf Coast from Naples up to Tampa, but it is, of course, still forecast to make that landfall along the Big Bend region as we head into the coming hours, sometime a little bit later tonight. So we'll take you through everything you need to know. There is some change to the forecast cone, but I just want to say off the bat, and you can see it very clearly here on this infrared satellite imagery, this storm is extremely large. The National Hurricane Center saying that this storm, one of the larger of the hurricanes in the Gulf over the last several decades. So really a monstrous storm. And when you have a storm this size, that's going to enhance the storm surge risk along the coast. That is one of the biggest things that we're going to be watching. Essentially, think about if you took like a toothpick or a popsicle stick and you swished it in the water, the smallest wave that would make. But then think about extending your arm out. If you were in a pool and you swish your arm through, how big that wave is going to be compared if you were holding a popsicle stick or using your finger to make that wave, right? That is kind of comparable to hurricane size. If you have a smaller hurricane with those smaller outer rain bands, that is still going to create a storm surge threat, but you don't have as vast of a fetch of water that you are pulling along shore. When you have these larger storms like this, that only enhances the storm surge threat, and they are thinking still potentially catastrophic storm surge along the Gulf, along the Big Bend region, I should say, which is still technically, of course, the Gulf Coast. So let's take you through the latest on Helene here. So when it comes to that forecast track, again, a couple of changes as of the 11 a.m. advisory, not necessarily in the strength, but more so the track. And this is going to continue to happen, unfortunately, until the eye can really kind of get its act together. Unfortunately, this has been a little bit of a sloppy storm. The eye of the hurricane is, of course, the center, and hurricane hunters have been flying in there all morning and all night last night. They give us really good data, but what they've been saying is that the eye wall has been a little bit messy, and it's been going through what we call eye wall replacement cycles. And essentially what happens during that is the eye wall will kind of expand and contract. Sometimes that will cause it to shift, and when that happens, that can kind of alter the track a little bit. So until the eye decides it wants to get its act together, which you really can't predict, we're gonna probably see these wobbles in the cone. But again, with this said, the storm is very large, and with any storm, the impacts of a storm are going to extend well outside the cone. So no matter how far east or west this continues to wobble, our impacts here at home are still going to be pretty significant for us. So this storm will make a landfall along the Big Bend region sometime late tonight, moving into South Georgia as a hurricane overnight, moving through North Georgia as a tropical storm with winds of upwards of 65 miles per hour at its core. The latest forecast cone as of the 11 a.m. advisory, which is when we got a brand new track, does show this shifting back to the west, bringing the center of the storm through Atlanta. I will say a lot of our model data does not have that happening. It has it moving more so east of Atlanta, but nonetheless, we are still looking at tropical storm force conditions across the area. In fact, we do have a tropical storm warning all the way through Friday for all of the area. And notice down towards Thomaston, that red color there, that's a hurricane warning. The further south of here you go towards central Georgia, we're looking at gusts anywhere between 60 to 80, maybe even closer to 90 mile per hour wind gusts in central and south Georgia. But that's not in the forecast for North Georgia. We are expecting tropical storm force conditions, not necessarily hurricane conditions, but that will need to be monitored for places like Upson and Lamar counties. So that includes places like Thomaston, where you could experience some pretty hefty wind gusts as we head through the overnight. Let's take you through First Alert Futurecast. So we've had some pretty light to steady rain through the morning. It's a good break. We had a lot of rain yesterday from a cold front that resulted in some flash flooding in parts of Douglas County and, of course, on some of our interstates. But right now we're kind of getting a little bit of a lull, but as we head into 6 o'clock, that's when those outermost rain bands will start to move in. At this point, Helene will be inching very close to the Big Bend region of Florida. So again, a very large storm. It's wind field extending like 300 miles outside from the center. That is really, really far. And so anyways, we head towards 6 o'clock for your evening commute. Hopefully a lot of you will be home at this point, but if not, expect some rain. A lot of you seem like you weren't going to work today. The roads are very quiet, so good for you because you don't want to be driving around in this mess. As we head into the late evening, that's when the really heavy rain will start to pick up. At this point, also, I do think we'll be watching for maybe some isolated severe weather. And by severe weather, I mean maybe some brief spin-up tornadoes. We did see that yesterday, but that was because of a cold front. This will be in the form of the spin-ups that come with outer rain bands of hurricanes. So something we'll be watching, I think, especially as we head into the second half of the day after 5 o'clock, we'll be watching for it. The threat is low, but it's not none for us. Taking you into the overnight hours. At this point, the storm is within the state of Georgia, and you can see that kind of hole just south of Eatonton. That is what this model, the graph, is thinking where it's thinking the center of circulation is going to go. So that would be the eye of the storm there. At this point, a tropical storm moving through Macon, Eatonton, the Louisville area, just to the west of Augusta, and bringing us very heavy rain. Now, it's not going to be a constant heavy rain. We're going to see this all come in kind of waves, those outer rain bands that will be spinning around this storm. So there will be breaks at times, but you don't want to let your guard down. You can kind of let your guard down really when the wind starts to calm down later Friday night into Saturday. With the elevated wind after all this rain, even late Friday morning, even when the rain is done, it's still going to be breezy, so that could still promote trees to come down, so that's something we'll be watching really carefully. But nonetheless, heaviest rain arrives late tonight, like after 8 o'clock, continues through the overnight hours and into very early Friday morning. And then notice by 10 o'clock, we start to dry out, maybe just a few lingering showers kind of trailing around, but the wind will still be elevated at this point. And then as we head into Friday night, the wind will start to gradually die down, and we'll see some clearing skies. Here's a look at the rainfall total. So we've already picked up about 3.5 inches of rain, and that's just in the city of Atlanta. Some spots have picked up more than that. Right now, our risk for flash flooding remains high, and it remains highest up in the mountains where they are expecting some very heavy rain to fall over the next 24 hours. So a widespread about 3 to 4 inches of rain. We're looking at maybe an additional 6 to 8 inches of rain up in the mountains, which would bring those totals well over 5 to 10 inches across North Georgia. Again, picked up over 3 inches of rain just in the city of Atlanta yesterday. Kind of area wide, we were looking at about a 1 to 3 inch range with some locally heavy amounts, and we'll add an additional 3 to maybe 6 to 8 on top of that, with again that real focal point up in the mountains. In fact, the flash flood threat high, these don't get issued very often, high threats for flash flooding, and when this pops up in our area, we really have to pay attention because unfortunately this situation is where you see about 80% of flash flood related damages. Also, of course, your threat to life and property goes up when you have a flash flood risk this high. The National Weather Service talking about the potential for maybe some landslides up in the mountains because of all this heavy rain. So if you live up in the mountains, you just need to stay extra vigilant. It's really important as you're driving around the next couple of days that you are just kind of staying weather aware, aware of your surroundings with the wind and the ground being saturated. Of course, that can cause trees to topple. But if you live in the mountains, we just want you to be on even higher alert because there is the potential for flash flooding, and that could, unfortunately, just because of the topography up there, lead to things like landslides. Now, that's not a sure bet, but it's something that we need to monitor really carefully for you. So again, we're looking at an additional about 3 to 6 inches of rain on top of the 1 to 3 we saw yesterday, which would bring those totals to about 6 to 10 inches of rain, which we were forecasting yesterday. Let's talk about the wind. This is kind of the secondary threat. Again, it does look like these numbers are starting to go down because that track is shifting a little further east. So if you are east of Atlanta, we're talking from Clayton to Gainesville, Athens down to Eatonton, Covington you included, you'll have the greatest impact when it comes to wind. You'll also have a slightly higher threat for severe weather. Not to say that all of the area isn't going to experience some very gusty wind. We're looking at a widespread 35 to about 60 mile per hour wind gusts with some isolated gusts 65 to 70 possible, especially east of Atlanta. So let's take you through by 4 or 5 o'clock. Between about 3 and 6 is when our highest wind gusts are to be expected because that's when Helene will be moving through our area, kind of paralleling our area. And so as we go towards 5 o'clock, we're looking at widespread gusts 30 to about 50 with those isolated gusts maybe 60 to 65 east of Atlanta. Going into 8 o'clock Friday morning, that center moving through the north portion of the state, our wind gusts will gradually start to die down, but still, even when when the rain is gone, here's 1 o'clock. Again, we should be mostly dry at this point. We're looking at widespread gusts about 25 to 30 with the saturated ground that still poses that threat for some trees to come down, especially after they had been beaten with the wind and rain for about 24 hours or so. So we're getting some questions on our Facebook. I appreciate you guys who are tuning in this morning. Close to the afternoon now. So Barrow County, it's really hard to go kind of county by county because we are looking at kind of a widespread event. Everyone is going to experience very similar impacts. But again, the further east you go, the further east of Atlanta that you live, we're going to be looking at slightly higher impacts. So kind of a general rule of thumb, if you take the downtown connector, 75, 85, if you live east of that, expect your wind threat to be a little higher. If you live up in the mountains, your flash flooding risk is a little higher. Otherwise, we're kind of looking at that general about an additional 3 to 5 inches of rain across the area and the wind gusts between about 35 to 50, potentially 60, 70. Again, if you take the connector anywhere east of that, you're kind of in the bullseye for some slightly higher impacts, especially if the storm kind of continues to track east of us. So when it comes to rain, anywhere, expect that rain to really fill in after about 5, 6 o'clock. So we're seeing, it looks like Gilbert Williams asking about rain in Conyers. So for those of you in Conyers, again, you're going to have the potential for some showers on and off throughout the day today, but that heavy rain, which is what you're really going to notice, will probably move in after 6 o'clock tonight and kind of continue on and off. Again, these are rain bands, so they're wrapping around a storm. You'll get periods of very heavy rain, and then you'll get some slight breaks and maybe some lighter drizzle, and then that heavier rain will fill in, and expect that to continue through about 7, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, and that's really for a lot of us across the area, not just Conyers. When for Atlanta, again, the kind of biggest time frame for the highest impact rain, the heaviest rain starts after about 8 o'clock. The highest wind gusts will be between, and this is area wide, 3 to 6 a.m. So while a lot of you are sleeping, some of you unfortunately might be waking up tomorrow morning. You go to turn the light on and it doesn't turn on. So that is kind of the unfortunate situation that we're in when it comes to the wind and the rain. That is definitely going to lead to power outages. And with it being overnight, you might go to bed with your power on and you're going to wake up and you might not be able to turn your lights on. So that's why we've been telling you to prepare, get your batteries, your flashlights, make sure your devices are charged. We are so lucky now to have these things. They have flashlights built into them. They come in handy. And you can also watch our coverage here as well, which is great. So if your power goes out and you can't turn the TV on, you want to know what's happening, you can watch our coverage right through our app, First Alert Weather app. Really, really, really good tool to have. Can't stress it enough. And Deshaun Marlowe asked about Carroll County. Again, kind of same thing. We're looking at a widespread, about 35 to 50 mile per hour gusts across the area with maybe some isolated gusts 60 to 70 if you live anywhere east of the downtown connector. So we're talking from Newton, Rockdale, Clark County, Oconee County, Greene County, Oglethorpe County. I can go on and on and on and on. Jackson County, Hall County. You have some slightly higher gusts and potentially a slightly higher severe risk for you as well. I'm going to keep moving forward here. Let's talk about the tornado risk. Again, not completely zero, but very, very low for us. And notice, as I talked about that higher wind threat, that's where a higher tornado threat is as well. Anywhere from the connector points off to the east, very low, 2% risk. The highest risk is over towards the coast because they are going to be on that right side of the storm completely, and you just get a little more wind shear. When you get on the outer edge of those rain bands, they can take advantage of wind shear and that spin from the storm and the friction from the ground a lot easier than kind of the heavier rain bands. But when you get on those outer edges of those rain bands, those little discrete cells that kind of develop in the outermost fringes of those rain bands really take advantage of wind shear well. So that's going to keep our tornado threat a little further towards the coast compared to us, but it's not none. So starting tonight, kind of again, when the heavy rain starts to move in, mainly after like 6, 7, 8 o'clock, I think we'll be watching for maybe a brief spin up, and that threat could continue into the overnight hours as well as that storm continues to move inland. Again, I mentioned the tornado threat definitely higher the further south and east you go. We've already seen a couple of tornado warnings. In fact, it looks like there's an active tornado warning just to the south of Savannah right now. But South Georgia and East Georgia, from Augusta down to Statesboro to Savannah, Albany included in that, that's where the higher tornado threat is, because again, the storm will be moving in a little stronger. And also if you're on the right side, we call that, for lack of better words, the dirty side of the storm, you just have that higher threat for tornadoes. So when you have a tornado watch, that's when tornadoes are possible over the next several hours. That's where they think the highest threat for tornadoes are going to be. That does not include our area. Again, our tornado threat very low, but not none. Really important to have a way to receive weather warnings with this storm moving in overnight and late in the evening when a lot of you will kind of be settling down for the day. The First Alert Weather app, that's another great reason to have it. It will alert you if there are any severe warnings, including tornado warnings within your area, flash flood warnings. It'll give you everything that is active in your area. Just make sure you go to the settings and turn on the notifications, and then turn your volume up a little bit louder through the overnight hours. Always a good idea. So when it comes to, I'm going to continue to move forward here, kind of an overview of our threats. I know I just threw a lot of information at you. Flooding is going to be fairly likely for us. The streets are going to be pretty tough to drive on, so we're really encouraging you not to drive after about 7 o'clock tonight through late tomorrow morning if you don't have to, because the roads just aren't going to be safe. Pair the wind, the rain, the potential flooding in the roadways. You just never know how deep water is. Flash flooding is a high threat for us, so we advise you not to drive if you don't have to. It seems like a lot of you are heeding that warning, which we are just really grateful for. Strong winds also going to be a likely scenario. Of course, tropical storm force winds, we're talking sustained 39 or higher. That looks likely with gusts anywhere between about 35 at their lowest to potentially as high as 50, 60 miles per hour. Further east, so again, in our far eastern counties from Athens all the way down to Eatonton, gusts upwards of 70 will be possible. We did bring that down from yesterday. Yesterday we were thinking we could experience gusts of upwards of 80 miles per hour. That's not looking likely for us anymore, but 70 is still nothing to joke about. Trees down, power outages, that will be likely. We've already unfortunately seen that just from our cold front yesterday. We're going to add more rain. We're going to have more wind today, so I do think that will be a likely scenario. And isolated tornadoes also possible, especially for those of you who live east of the downtown connector. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with the downtown connector is. If you live east of that, especially east of 285, I think your threat for an isolated tornado definitely a little bit higher. So the closer out towards Athens you go, I think the slightly higher your tornado threat will be, again, because you're just kind of on the outer fringes of those rain bands that take advantage of our wind shear that naturally comes with landfalling tropical systems will have. So we will be watching for some spin within some of these storms that'll move in a little bit later today. But that's kind of a general overview, and this is all through Friday that we'll be watching for this. And our First Alert Weather team will be here all throughout the night. We'll be giving you hourly updates throughout the evening and the afternoon and evening into the overnight hours. We are fully staffed to make sure that we give you everything you need to know as soon as that information comes in so we can get you through this. The good news is, beyond our First Alert Weather Day today and tomorrow, we'll actually have a pretty nice weekend set up and a really nice week beyond. So just got to get through the next about really 24 hours or so. This time tomorrow, Friday, that storm is going to be moving out, still be breezy, but we'll finally be able to say goodbye to Helene, just not completely her impacts. But nonetheless, as we head into this upcoming weekend, we'll have some pretty comfortable temperatures. We'll be mostly dry. We'll see sunshine return. So again, just got to get through Helene. We will get more updates from the National Hurricane Center throughout the morning. In fact, as it moves closer to the Big Bend, we'll probably start to get some intermediate advisories that'll come out hourly, and we will be sure to give you all of that latest information as it comes into us. So we appreciate you spending some time with us this morning, choosing us for your information on Helene. We really do appreciate it, and we will continue to keep you updated throughout the day. Stay safe, everyone. Make sure those devices are charged. Make sure you have the First Alert Weather app, all the things, so you can be prepared over the next 24 hours, and we'll catch you here next time.